COVID pandemic has changed lifestyles and, most importantly, the way of working across the globe. First, it was remote, and now we see hybrid, with some people returning to the workplaces. This has given birth to what can be called the new future of work. To understand the evolving nuances of building for new future of work, we have with us today Maneesh Sharma, Country Manager, GitHub. Hi, Manish.
Hi, Madhurima. Hello, everybody. Great to be
Yeah.
here.
So Manish is GitHub India's general manager leading the company's growth and operations. He's passionate about technology and software innovation, and Manish has over 22 years of experience in the industry. Manish, we are very excited to have you here with us and given the topic that we have, right? As we all know, the irreversible shift that has happened in this world of work, hybrid is the new normal. And as organizations reimagine the future of work, workplace and workforce, technology has a key role to play. GitHub is one of the most familiar names that we have in the tech world, right? So before we jump into our conversation, tell us something interesting about GitHub and its history.
Sure, Madhurima. Before I kickstart the GitHub conversation, I thought maybe we should change our title. It's no longer, building for the new future of work. I'd like to use English grammar and say this is present continuous, right? So the future is not the future. This is present continuous anyway. We've been talking about it since last year. But quickly talking about GitHub, all developers, all tech people here would know GitHub. It's a software collaboration platform, and it actually started with the simple idea of getting distributed developers to collaborate, and this was more than almost 14 years back. And if you really think about it, the bedrock of distributed work has always been open source. And so you never have teams or developers sitting together and working on a project in a single building or even in a single office. It's always volunteers, it's always software developers distributed across the world. And I think that's the core of what GitHub started for. It was to bring these developers together to build on top of open source projects. And the network effects kicked in. More and more open source projects came in, more and more developers came in to work on these projects. They discovered more projects, started to contribute a lot more code. And it's just grown beyond after that. More than 73 million developers call GitHub home to come and share code. So that's what we've been doing. And I think, this present continuous of distributed work is going to be an interesting conversation with you, Madhurima.
Great. So Manish, tell us, how do you expect, I said future of work, but I'm going to say this present continuous new way of working is going to pan out. Given that I understand GitHub has always had remote as a big part of its way of working, right? So if you could share something, some thoughts on that, and any interesting examples that you have been doing recently at GitHub, which kind of exemplify the power of remote working or hybrid working.
Sure. I think at the core of our industry, which is the software industry, uh, it's actually a team sport, right? You don't have one individual sitting in a corner having pizza, writing code. You have a lot of other team members collaborating on it. And if you really think about it, just this whole concept that India has been working on over the last 3+ decades of having, distributed work. Work has been flowing across geographies. People have been collaborating and working on it. I think that's been the bedrock of what software engineering is all about. And what we're starting to see is people being more comfortable, given that technologies have also advanced, right? So you no longer need to set up a lot of infrastructure to be able to collaborate and do distributed work and collaboration, right? So platforms like GitHub, where you can just come on the platform and collaborate on code or even deploy applications on the cloud, is actually accelerating software development. If you think about GitHub, as you said, we've always been remote because our platform is meant to enable distributed collaboration, right? And we live by those ethos. We have developers all over the world and across India as well. I have colleagues sitting in Munnar working on GitHub, and I'm always envious of that. And I think this trend is going to continue. I'm starting to see a lot of startups in India as well, more so open source projects from India, having developers from outside of India working on their projects. And I think it's only going to increase now.
Great, thanks. I think that addressed a great point about, given that we actually, let me ask your view on that. Given the global talent crunch that is happening today, right? Because technology cannot deliver the promised productivity gains if there are not enough human workers with the right skills for all the AI ML that we talk about, right? We still need humans. It's about people, end of the day. And we are seeing there's a global talent crunch because of which, the rapid pace of growth that is happening today. So how do you envisage that this future of work will happen in this context? How can we involve more students which are placed remotely? You talked about developers outside the country building working on projects together. uh, any thoughts, any examples, any projects that you've seen that has worked?
Sure, I think that's a great question, Madhurima. Talent is at the core of what we're doing, and I wish there was a way of representing Moore's law in the human capital world in the software industry, because as tech is advancing, so is the need for a lot of the human capital and the engineers coming out and working on it. And our industry is such that it's ever changing. There are multiple languages, there are multiple cloud offerings, and multiple technologies that everybody has to keep on learning because you're working on these projects. And given that all of this is available for anybody, I think learning is at the core of it. And you touched on an important part. I think this whole supply demand problem exists, but at the same time, if we just step back and look at India, we have more than 1 million software engineers coming out of college almost every year. And we see organizations, we see startups always struggle to hire the best talent. I think there's an opportunity to connect these two. And this is, an experiment that we did last year. Given that, pandemic was going on, there were lots of these students in the final year who could not do their internships. We thought, hey, people are already doing projects on GitHub. There are open source projects. There are startups that are running on GitHub all over the world. Why don't we get students, no matter where they are? They could be at home, they could be in a remote college in India, get them connected to these projects. And what started off as an experiment just took a life of its own. We were so overwhelmed with both sides, supply and demand, as I said, colleges and students really wanting to work on projects. And we had organizations, not just from India, but globally as well, who wanted to tap into the talent that is available in India. And we did the summer cohort. I wanted to do only 50. We got about 1,500 students eager to participate, but we couldn't accommodate. And we just launched the next cohort today. And I think that's a good example of talent being available anywhere. It's not just companies that we are running or startups that we are running from India tapping into talent globally. It's the availability of the talent in India for companies all over the world. Because of distributed work, because of tools and technologies that are available, they are now able to work on startups, companies, and projects from any part of the world. And I think that's the exciting part. It gives so much opportunity to these students. um, you know and when I looked at the projects that they were doing, some of them were writing parsers for file optimization, some of them were working on blockchain applications, and these were real life projects, right? These were not just something that they're learning in the lab. This is something that they will work on, which will be used by end customers, and that gave them so much of experience, which I'm sure as they enter the workforce, these are the next generation of software developers, they will be fully equipped. So I think this distributed nature is giving this opportunity for students and developer talent all over the world to be tapped.
Great. Yeah, that's lovely to know about this experiment and the sheer scale. As you said, you were expecting 50 and you got 1,500. So congratulations on the next cohort. And I think that's an idea that a lot of other companies can also follow on and experiment with. So, Manish, coming to the next question, right? And it is about innovation. All of us, right, here at NPC and in India in general, today innovation is a big word. It's happening everywhere. And there is a lot of commentary that's happening about innovation becoming static and siloed, given that people are not in touch with each other in person, because that leads to a lot of impromptu conversations. How do you think GitHub has managed to continue innovating despite having a distributed workforce? And any learnings that you want to share with us in how that can help us, continue the present continuous and build the future?
Sure, Madhurima. I really wish there was a silver bullet that I could share with everybody to shoot, but I can just share experiences. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. One, as I said, the ethos of GitHub itself, because we're enabling distributed software development, we live by them. And what we've done is we've purposely built all our systems, our processes, our technologies within the company around this. So we started with a remote first thought process. In fact, there's a podcast that you can go and listen to from the founder of GitHub, who's saying that when they started within the first 3 4 months, they never thought of hiring anybody, but there was a remote developer who reached out and said, "Hey, I love GitHub and I'm supporting all developers on the platform. Can I join you?" And they just hired that individual. And that's how more and more employees came into the company from all corners of the world because they were passionate about supporting developers. And what that forced GitHub to do was to build the systems and processes, as I said, to be remote first. So when the unfortunate pandemic hit, while a lot of organizations were reacting, for us it was business as usual because everything was already set. I think from a product perspective, we're always thinking about how do we make the life of developers a lot more easy, right? How can we automate a lot more stuff? How can we provide more tools so that they can create a lot more software, and in general increase velocity? Because in the distributed world, you need a lot of these things to be connected to each other as well. So at behind the technology, there's the communication piece. As you said, people are not meeting and innovation is not happening. So I think people are now getting used to the whole sync and async communication as well, right? Using all different technologies for sync communication like this. Right? We're live, but at the same time using async methods to document, to share information. I think nothing can take away the physical experience, which is why I'm sure all of us have heard hybrid as the word. So nothing would be completely virtual. Hybrid will always be there. And let's see, there's a lot of talk about the metaverse, right? So maybe there might be different experiences of us just stepping into the metaverse and interacting with each other.
Yeah, that's certainly something that will create a lot of various kind of emotions in people. Just talking about metaverse. So I'm going to park that for now, but we'll come back if we have more time. And I'll also request the audience, if you have any questions that you want to ask Manish, please type it in the chat window, and I will try and take at least some of them up. Yeah. So, Manish, what I gathered from your response is that it's really technology that has come to our rescue today, which allows us the sync and async communication. So, a big round of applause, for technology that is enabling us to stay connected and innovation to happen. Let me ask you. We've seen the good side of hybrid and remote, and is do you really think everything is going to be hunky dory in the future of work, in the new ways of working, or do you see there are some challenges that one needs to be aware of?
I think challenges are definitely there. This is human nature as well, evolving and adapting as well. I think one of the biggest thing is the emotional aspect. Um, Much has been talked about it, but I still think not much has been talked about it. While tools and technologies can enable a lot of things, not everybody is the same, right? There are, as they say, extroverts and introverts. So how do they behave in the virtual world? Just because I'm not responding, does that mean I do not know something? Or is it that I'm not comfortable? Or is it that I'm dealing with a family situation at home because the time of doing work will change when I'm in hybrid? So I think having more workshops and conversations on how do you balance this in a remote environment, how do you communicate more, is going to be very important. And I think there's another very interesting aspect that I'm starting to see is the cultural aspect. So as I said, now we will have a distributed team, we will have a team all over the world, and cultural nuances also become very important. right? So the subtle messages, the subtle things that go into code as well, how a developer in India would behave versus a developer in some other part of the world would behave. I think those cultural nuances are also going to be accentuated because everybody is distributed and connected in the virtual world now. So I think these softer aspects, Madhurima, needs to be sort of dwelled upon and discussed a lot more, so that we can sort of get the whole new wave or new culture of hybrid work going.
Yeah, very interesting thoughts there, Manish. Culture is something that has been spoken about a lot, and you know, plays a very important role, as you very rightly said. Now, Mike, another next question to you is, kind of around culture. So, how do startups that are still early in their journey, how do they build this culture, right? Especially, uh, it'll be much more difficult for them to drive or propagate that culture across their employees when they are not all in office. Any thoughts on how that can be done? Any examples you want to share from the early days of GitHub or otherwise?
Sure. I think over the last 1 year, people have been experimenting with different ways of connecting. I think in a distributed world, in this new present continuous future of work, um, over communication is something that needs to be done. So, given that people are going to be on different time zones, people are not going to be working synchronously. Um, Keep on communicating is an important aspect, and it's irrespective of whether you're a startup or a large organization, um, because it's very easy to feel disconnected in this new normal if you're remote. So the more communication, the more exchange of information and stuff that happens is going to be important. That doesn't mean you do more meetings, right? That doesn't mean you do stand-up meeting in the morning in India and stand-up meeting when it's in the morning in the US. That's not what I mean. I think it's just the sync and async communication needs to be a lot more. But then there are lots of these, fun things that have also been built in. For example, many companies are also doing secret santas, right? So we have people all over the world, and you just participate in being a secret santa so that you can send a gift to somebody else. So these connects are going to be important. I know people have been doing quizzes, people have been doing a lot of different things. There is a burnout as well, overdoing these things. There's a fine balance. um, I think, which is where people have to be very normal and natural in the virtual world as well, not to be uh, you know trying to do something which is not natural, right? It'll come out. From a startup perspective, Madhurima, I think it also boils down to the founders to make sure that they're communicating the vision, they're communicating the progress, they're communicating the direction of the startup to the entire team, because nobody is physical. In the old world, which is last year and before, you could always go out for a cup of coffee. You could have these pizza parties on Friday evening in the office of a startup, but you can't do that anymore. So it's important to keep having these celebrations as well, small, small wins, which is where the founders and the leaders have to communicate more and more to the team on what's going on, because they're always looking for direction from the leaders. So I think it's all the
Yeah.
softer aspects, Madhurima.
That's exactly what I heard, and I cannot emphasize the importance of communication again, as Manish you have brought out in all your examples, right? You have to communicate whether it's synchronous, asynchronous, over email, over virtual meetings, and yes, why not have pizza over virtual? The world, everybody gets pizza delivered to their homes, and you open up uh, a video platform and eat it together.
Yeah,
Yes, we
I know
have
we're
a
short of
question.
time. We're short of time. I know we could have discussed how we will eat pizzas in the meta world, but let's take the question from the audience.
Yes, we have a question from Shivraman Natarajan. How has the new way of collaboration and the openness to open source, especially from some tech giants, changed the perception of buyers today, especially in the context of mushrooming startups and unicorns?
I love the question, Shivaraman. I wish I had more time, but in short, open source has won, right? Every technology, every software product, every software project in the world has open source embedded in. I'm sure this platform that we're using, Zardal, has a lot of open source embedded in it. So I don't think it's a argument of the relevance of open source, whether it's a unicorn or an enterprise or any project. I think the interesting thing that's happening is the whole community coming together and contributing. If you look at open source startups, and there are many in India as well, um, they're realizing that it's a great way to scale, right? So instead of going out and hiring thousands of or hundreds of developers, if you take the open source route, you can have passionate developers from anywhere in the world come and build your product. Localization is a great example. If you build an open source project in India, somebody sitting in Mexico would be localizing your product because they need to use it in their country. And that's just accelerating your innovation. That's just accelerating your go to market as well. So I think the open source and openness to open source is really going to drive a lot of innovation, especially in India when we talk about NPC. The whole product economy, the product ecosystem is only going to get accelerated because these building blocks that you can take from open source is actually going to accelerate how you're building software, how you're taking it to market as well. It's exciting times.
Great. Thanks for that, Manish. I think we are out of time, though there are certain questions, and there's a lot more that we could have got from you. But I'll just do a quick summary. So, yes, let's not call it future of work. As Manish says, it is the present continuous. We continue with that. Collaboration, communication are some of the bedrocks, and innovation can happen anywhere, as has happened in the past with GitHub and others. There are certain challenges, but yes, they can be overcome. Build a strong culture, and there are various ways to do that. So thank you, Manish. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. And I'll close this session now, but I have to mention, I love the octocat ears that you're sporting on your chair.
Yeah, as you can see, I'm, yeah, true to the brand. I just love what I do. I love that, a platform like GitHub for developers in the largest developer market in the world, I'm able to support all the tech companies and developers here. So true to the brand.
Great. Thank you so much, Manish. It's
Thank
a
you,
pleasure to
Madhurima.
host
Thanks,
you.
everybody.